1968, Philip K. Dick created a dystopian world of androids, empathy tests, and automated animals in his novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Yes, this is the basis for the movie Blade Runner, but the two have only passing similarities. The novel delves much deeper into the dark and dying world inhabited by Rick Deckard. It explores the effects of technology like a machine that dials up emotional states, and asks deep questions about the nature of humanity and whether empathy is a necessary facet of that nature. It's great fodder for conversation. So guest host Jay Schweig and I got some simulated beer and scrounged up a bottle of Chablis we've been saving since World War Terminus to talk about those questions. It's time for episode 13 of Toasting the Classics, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? We're recording, is that right? We're live?
Yeah, we should be recording here.
Okay, so welcome to Toasting the Classics. It's the podcast where we read a book, watch a movie or whatever, and then we present whatever the classic is that we read or watched, and we drink a drink that's related to it. It's a little bit different today. First of all, we're on Zoom, which has happened before. But second of all, we've got a guest host today.
Hi there.
Who are you? Where do you come from?
My name's Jay.
Are you
Schweig.
Sure you're not a replicant?
I'm like 80% sure I'm not.
Okay.
Maybe 85.
Okay.
And I come from, actually, I guess the state I'm in does border Dave's state. So I'm in Oklahoma.
Yeah, I always tell people I'm only one state away from you. Unfortunately, that state is Texas. Because I remember I called Karina from Louisiana when I was driving home, and that's what I said. I was like, I'm only one state away. Unfortunately, it's the 900-mile drive.
That is a rough state. Yeah. So
yeah.
And I should say for the audience, I've known Dave forever. I've probably known you since, I don't know if you want to say, it kind of dates us, right? So
we've done a lot specifically. Of that. First of all, half of the things we talk about on the show took place in the 70s, so that's a dead giveaway.
Okay.
And when they don't, we're like, oh, we were teenagers, and it was 1992. So it's there's no mysteries here.
So I've probably known you since maybe 1998, 99.
I had a big breakup in 97. I started having to make friends at college. I was just hanging out with my girlfriend for the first couple of years. So I knew Alan Richards. That was the only person I knew at college, basically, because I was not hanging out with anybody. So what did you? So you got to choose for today. What we're gonna do? Went with book because we're not on the rotation. Normally the rotation is book, movie, free choice, but you're a guest. You get to choose whatever. So what'd you go with?
Oh, awesome. So I went with Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? This is a book from, I think it's from 1968 about.
I think that's right.
And obviously it's kind of most famous as being the basis for Blade Runner, which is kind of weird because Blade Runner is, there are some deeper themes to it, but it's mostly kind of a sci-fi-ish action movie. And Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? I mean, it's not very surprising. There's androids in the title, obviously, is a sci-fi book.
Well, one of the major themes of the book is the whole the android question, right? Like the consciousness of androids. That's pretty present in the film. I mean, I think that's kind of it's not as well dealt with, obviously, in the film.
Yeah.
But it's there. If you watch the movie a bunch of times, you're going to be thinking about it.
And I should mention that this movie kind of began, for better or for worse, a trend of making movies out of the works of Philip K. Dick, right? Because Total Recall is Philip K. Dick, and then some worse ones like Paycheck with Ben Affleck, and I think one with Nicolas Cage.
Are you kidding? Is the movie Paycheck based? Wow.
Yeah.
Well, there's the TV show Man in the High Castle, which I've never seen.
And that I think is supposed to be pretty good. I think I watched part of the first season.
Well, that book is actually more acclaimed than this one. Weirdly enough, I think it was either a Hugo or a Nebula that it won. This one didn't win any awards, as far as I knew.
Yeah,
but I never read that and never saw it, so I don't.
Yeah, so one of the reasons that I thought this would be a good book to talk about is I think some of the themes are actually very applicable to stuff that everyone's experiencing today. And I guess we can get to that in a little bit.
Isolation?
Well, isolation,
what are you thinking?
Well, actually, I think a lot of what technology has kind of given us is this idea that, like, hey, there's something just as good as a normal experience, namely like what we're on right now. We're on Zoom right now.
Yeah.
But, I'm sure everyone's experienced this where, you have a Zoom get together with like 10 people, but it doesn't feel like you just hung out with those 10 people, right?
No.
There's something very different in a simulation, in a technologically kind of age of simulation, than a more organic interaction.
Here's something I always wonder. I always come away from those, like, it's better talking to people over Zoom than not talking to anybody, right? Like, we've had a couple of gatherings with old friends and things like that, but I always come away from it like a little bit cold. It doesn't give me, like, if I hung out with my friends, I'd have kind of a buzz from it, like I'd get kind of a charge from seeing everybody. And I'm wondering whether that applies to people that are not extroverts, because I think I draw energy from hanging out with people. Like, that's my personality type.
Yeah.
I think some people, they feel drained by that.
I'm kind of weird, and I think I'm kind of the same way, but it needs to be the right people, right?
Right.
So
well, yeah.
It's well, yeah. I mean, like
going to like a funeral with a bunch of like distant relations that like are Amish or something. That's not that. I don't get a lot of energy out of that. But yes, the right.
Oh people, no, I draw tons of energy from distant relative Amish funerals. That's the best.
Those are good.
But there is, and again, it's nice seeing people over Zoom. Yeah, like you said, it is very different to have something, and I think, and also in the university setting, I teach at a university, and so there's kind of been this idea, like
a university
COVID,
which shall
like,
remain unnamed, or
oh,
shall the university remain on? Oh, okay. I didn't know if you get
Oklahoma State. No, I don't think I should get in trouble for it. And I've also, I've said my name, so obviously.
And definitely everything Jay says tonight are the sole views of Oklahoma State University, right?
Yes.
Yeah. We're attributing all of the things you say. To, good.
No. Nothing is the view of Oklahoma State University.
Oh, that's right. I knew there was some kind of a disclaimer. It's been a while for me.
But obviously, there's with COVID and precautions of going online, there's kind of been this idea, like, and I think going into it, and not just my university, but all universities going into it, we're like, hey, we can teach classes online over Zoom, and it's kind of the same thing. And something we found out in the past year, it's not the same at all. It's kind of amazing how markedly different it is. And one of the reasons is, when you're like at a class on Zoom, it's not an immersive experience. You can have like, your professor, open in some window, and then you're browsing the internet in another window or something like that. And you kind of have this idea, like, I'm taking part in this thing, but it's not the immersive social experience that being in a class actually is. And I think that's very similar to what you were saying with hanging out with people. It's not the same immersive thing. If we're on Zoom with 4 friends, it's definitely not the same as, actually hanging out with those 4 friends.
Yeah, when I went to law school, I got there my first semester, and I was one of the only people that didn't bring a laptop to class every day. And most people were like sitting on their laptops, like clicking away. And I finally I was using a notebook for like the first semester. And I finally broke down and started bringing a laptop, and my engagement with the class dropped off like by half.
Yeah.
I was distracted by having a computer. I wasn't looking at the professor. I was typing.
Absolutely.
And Zoom has got to be even worse, because you're sitting at home in your underwear taking I don't know, are there rules? Are you not? Do you have to have pants on while you're taking a class? I don't really know. Like
that would be a weird thing to put on the syllabus. Like,
well, I've heard little kids, elementary school kids, get in trouble for all kinds of stuff. There was a kid had a Nerf gun behind him, and he got in trouble for having the rules for having a gun at school. It was just like,
that's crazy. That's bizarre.
It's pretty ridiculous. So,
well, I actually didn't require that students have their camera on or anything, because that felt intrusive. It would be weird if, like, during a normal semester, I like went over to like their house and I was like, so what's going on in your living room here, right? And it feels intrusive when you're on a Zoom call with someone you don't know very well, and you're like looking at their house, right? So I didn't want to require students
and
to
unnecessary,
have their camera on.
right? And unnecessary. Like, what are you gaining? I guess you'd be gaining the human connection from your students by seeing them, but nothing that would actually help you do your job, I wouldn't think so.
Yeah, I think the only reason that that I don't know if some people did require it, but I think the only reason to require it would be to make sure that the students are actually paying attention, right? Because otherwise the student could have the Zoom thing on, and we saw this with other schooling too, right? Like students would just keep Zoom on and then go do other things because it just says they're checked in on the call, right?
Right.
Which is obviously very, very different than being in a class.
Yeah, I was so glad my kids went back to school early on. I mean, it was a couple of months and then they went back to school, so it wasn't too bad. So I guess all this is by way of asking the question whether like a relationship with an android could be the same in a sense. Like,
and I think
it's kind of like a Turing test question, and it's reminding me of, you know, Robert Nozick, the philosopher. He's got like the pleasure box idea.
Oh yeah.
If you could be in a pleasure box and just press all those buttons, would it? And for some, you're supposed to answer, and everybody does answer that no, it wouldn't be the same thing. So it's kind of like that. It's like for some reason, it not being real matters.
Yeah,
you know, even more so than Zoom, because I mean, Zoom is real. It's a real person.
I think the thing that can be, you know, that's kind of similar throughout it is this kind of hubris that technology has, that, you know, we can do this thing exact substituting for, you know, something that's more organic, right? Like, you know, you want to hang out with someone, it's exactly the same as seeing them on a screen. And I think we can all agree it's really not. And we're only starting to finally understand kind of how it's different.
I'm not even 100% sure I know. And most of it's the immersion, I guess, just the sensory immersion with talking to somebody and maybe being able to like improvise and be like, hey, let's go somewhere else or something like that. Like it's just more free. I don't know.
I think there's certain intangibles just from being in person with someone, right? I think one thing, you know, in terms of classes, I think one thing that's very different for in-person classes versus online is the thing that really makes students do well in an in-person class is the social pressure, right? You see everyone else doing well and paying attention, and you're like, oh, I should pay attention too. Yeah. But you know, if you're just online, it's just all theoretical. You're like, well, maybe there are other people watching. Maybe it's just me watching. Maybe I can just kind of tune it out.
Also, doesn't everybody just kind of feel like everyone's winging it? You know, everyone's flying by the seat of their pants because it's COVID and it doesn't really count. I mean, I think
also a lot of it is the moment in history, the kind of unfortunate moment in history we're occupying right now.
Do you have trouble separating? So clearly this book, the movie weighs really heavily, right? Do you have I was almost having trouble as I was reading. I was kind of like jotting down some thoughts about the book, and I was trying not to have them all be contrasts with the movie. Most of my thoughts were like, oh, that wasn't in the movie. Oh, that wasn't in the movie. You know, and it was like, I realized after a while, I was like, this is getting old. It's really not that much like the movie. So
I think for me, because I reread this book recently, and I had read it before, I think 1 or 2 times. So it's fairly familiar to me. Okay. And so I kind of actually think of this book before I think of the movie.
Okay.
In a way. So like, you know, when I'm picturing things, I'm not picturing Harrison Ford as Rick Deckard or what's her name? Sean Young as Rachel Rosen or something like
that one I couldn't stop picturing Sean Young as Rachel Rosen, but I did drop the Harrison Ford wasn't in there. And I could see the architecture of all the rooms and buildings as being completely different, because immediately it was pretty clear it wasn't just based on, you know, the movie wasn't based on the book at all. I kind of think from what I read about the movie, it seemed like they just kind of wanted to make a certain sort of movie, and they kind of glommed this story onto the movie. Some like ideas they had for drawing a future city, and like the title of the movie has nothing to do with the book. Yeah. It's like some other book that they took a title from that was attached to a different screenplay.
At least this was from an actual book, right? The not as good Philip K. Dick adaptations usually come from short stories, so they have like, you know, 5 pages of source material.
And is that what Total Recall a full book, or is it a short story?
No, it's a short story. It's called We Can Remember It For You for Wholesale or something like that.
Oh, okay, yeah, I've heard that before. Yeah, that's right.
But
so probably no three-breasted woman on Mars. That's not in there. Probably the mutants, I'm guessing they added.
I don't really know. I'm just trying to figure.
Yeah, I don't even know if he goes to Mars in the short story. I mean, it's been a long time since I've read it, but
they added
yeah.
the part where he goes to Mars. They added that.
They're like, okay, Phil, love the story. Want to just make a couple of small little tweaks. First, not on Earth, on Mars.
That's pretty random.
Yeah.
That's pretty random notes. Yeah.
Like, yeah. That's the guy that just suggests that for everything, right? He suggests it for like,
Have you seen the bit where the guy he does like a brainstorm session to get ideas for Gremlins 2?
Oh no.
Oh my God, you got to look it up. It's just like, it's like the running gag is that it's just people saying insane things. And the guy's like, that's it. It's in the movie. It's in the movie. And then at the end, it's just like, all these things are actually in the movie. It's like, I want a Batwing gremlin that flies across the city. I want an electric gremlin that comes out of the plugs. And it's like, they're just like, fine, it's in the movie. It's in the movie. It's a good bit. It's Key and Peele. It's a Key and Peele sketch.
Oh, nice. I love them. There's a great Onion. Like the Onion has a fake morning show, like they have videos for a fake morning show. And they had one where they talked to the 5-year-old screenwriter of Fast and the Furious 5. And so he's this little kid and he's like, so the car goes pow and the other car goes into the ocean. And then they show that in the movie. And it's like they show like a car like
that's the same
another
joke.
one.
I love it.
Yeah, it's the same joke.
Okay.
But one thing the movie ignores is Philip K. Dick is I think really funny. I think there are a lot of really funny parts, like with the mood organ at the beginning where they're dialing in. And he's like, he's telling his wife, like, dial in, happy. And he's like, and she's like, but if I'm depressed, I'm not going to even want to dial in happy.
Right.
And then he's like,
dial in acceptance of everything your husband says.
No, but then he's like, dial in the feeling of wanting to dial in something better. And she's like, but I don't even want that. And so, there are a lot of Philip K. Dick books. There are really kind of, very, I don't know if satirical is the right word, but there are funny moments with technology. There's another book, I can't remember exactly which one.
Well, so one of the basic facts of science fiction, I always think, is it's like you set up an idea, a concept, something that could develop in the future, and then you see where it goes with it. And it's almost like this version is like, it would also cause funny circumstances. So it's like, that's part of the way he's writing the science fiction. He's like, there would be a lot of comical conversations if you could control your emotions, if you could dial in emotions. I can't remember what the thing is called, but the Penfield or something, right? Is it
the Penfield mood organ? Yeah. There's another Philip K. Dick book where a guy, like, everything is like coin or money operated, and everything is like sentient. And so a guy doesn't have money to leave his apartment because he can't afford to pay his like doorknob. And so he's like arguing with the doorknob. So there's like 2 pages. He's just arguing with the doorknob about why the doorknob should let him in for free or something like that.
Yeah. Now that you're saying that, I mean, I wasn't like, falling over laughing while reading this, but they're comical conversations. It's a bit like we did a previous show about Macbeth. And it was like sometimes in Shakespeare, there are conversations that are funny in a very dry kind of way. You're like, this is a funny bit, but I'm not exactly laughing out loud. So that's probably why they didn't do it in a movie. But
also, I think it would be a weird tone to hit in a movie, right? Like darkly science fiction and like kind of very dystopian, right? Because the book is dystopian too, right? They're, the Earth has like all these issues and, but then also funny, I think, is a hard tone to hit with a movie, right? Yeah,
it works better in a book. Especially, I mean, Ridley Scott, he's just not a guy that's trying to make you laugh when he makes a movie. So
I thought Alien was hilarious.
Right. Actually, Aliens, the second one, the James Cameron one, it has a couple of moments where there's a little bit of a quip or something. But
that's James Cameron, so it's more of like a blockbuster.
Honestly, I think that's why I always enjoyed that one more than I enjoyed the first Aliens, because I need a little bit of relief. It's hard for me to watch 2 hours of like, I mean, I never loved Blade Runner. Like, I mean, I definitely see it as being a very good movie, but like, I don't want to watch it over and over again. And like, it's just kind of a slog a little bit. I actually watched it with my son. He's 10 and he like, I kept looking over and be like, do you like this movie? He's like, yeah, I love this movie. Like, don't turn it off. Like, he really was into it. So I was impressed.
Well, there's
So,
I mean, there's kind of a bigger conversation there as to like, what's a movie's role, right? Because
right,
like,
right.
obviously, one movie I watched for the first time last year was Andrei Tarkovsky's not the Sacrifice, Stalker, which is
Mm,
4.5 hours, very slow moving Russian.
yeah.
It's undoubtedly a work of art, but I would sooner watch, there's like that
Yeah.
webcam that like watches that pitch drop at that university in like England or something, right? So it's like
Watches the
it's,
pitch drop, but you mean like
it's like the pitch liquid, so it's like one drop falls every
oh,
seven
yeah, yeah,
years or
I have
something.
heard of that.
I would
I have heard of
sooner
that.
watch
Yeah.
that than watch
Yeah.
Stalker again,
I
right?
know I
So
know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. That's like the most viscous substance known to humanity, right? Or something
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
And it like, yeah,
yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yes, I
Apparently
would
there was
rather
a
watch
drop that fell and the webcam wasn't working, and it's like, come on. Just like of all the times there's like one drop of
yeah.
like something like 5 years. It's like you really can't get the webcam working just for
And
that.
there was some guy watching, like, and that's when he was like, "Oh no, it cut out." No, 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 no. Yeah,
He's been watching for like 20 years, just never leaving his computer. He's like, here it goes.
that's pretty funny. Yeah, I don't know where I heard about that. Oh, I read a book about like chemistry superlatives, and they mentioned that. That's what it was. Because they also mentioned, Vanta Black, like the blackest substance known to
Yeah.
humanity. They talked about that. There were a bunch of things like that in the book. So
All I
pretty good times. Pretty good times to read. Pretty good read.
all I
Speaking
know,
of,
we're headed up to the beach. I get the sunblock, I get the beach towels, and I get my book of chemistry superlatives. Those are the three main things you gotta have.
you're laughing, but I would rather read that than like most of what you see people reading at the beach. Like
Oh
it's one
yeah,
of those
yeah, definitely.
like dime a dozen spy thrillers or whatever that you always see people reading. Like they made a
Yeah.
movie of like Jack Reacher, and I was like, what the hell is Jack Reacher? Like I'd never heard of that. And it was like apparently there's like 45 books about it. It's like a big
Oh really? That many?
yeah. Oh, I don't know.
It's
No,
like
I'm talking.
the airport kind of books,
Yes.
like the
Yeah.
yeah.
What do you think was, I don't know, what do you think was like the biggest difference with the movie? Not to talk about that again, but I feel like that keeps coming up in my
uh,
mind.
so
I thought like the Rutger Hauer, like the Roy Batty character is like a
yeah,
fat slob in the
yeah.
book. And I was like, wait a minute, where he's like this superhuman,
Well, I think
killing machine.
actually, I should ask you, how many spoilers are we allowed to say in this thing? Because I don't want to spoil
We're assuming that you either read the book or you're not
or
gonna.
don't care. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah.
So I would say that one of the biggest differences, at least I found, rereading the book more recently,
I
is
think I know
that
which spoiler you're talking about, probably, right?
one of the themes of the book is that the difference, or the thing that actually makes people human, is like empathy or kindness,
Uh-huh.
right? And this is almost never touched on in the movie except with like the empathy test, right? So they
Right.
do they do give that empathy test in the movie, and they're not
Mhm.
really, I, I can't remember, they're not super clear about what's going on there, right? They're kind
No,
of
they're
looking
not.
at,
No, you're
the
totally left to
eyes and
like,
stuff.
yeah. There's that bit where the first guy that's getting interviewed, the first android that gets interviewed, he's that weird looking actor that used to be in a
Yeah,
bunch of
yeah,
stuff.
the
He's a character
character
actor
actor
guy,
guy.
yeah. And I remember watching that and being like, what is going on here? Like, what
Yeah,
am
me
I?
too.
Why are you asking about a turtle? What does that even mean? Because they don't explain the world building is
Yeah,
why people would have these big reactions to something bad happening to an animal, right? Like
yeah,
animals are like almost extinct and very rare in the book. And so if something
yeah,
bad happens to a turtle, like honestly, in real life, in the real world, people hurt turtles like for
yeah,
fun. They have no
yeah.
empathy towards something like a turtle.
Well,
They're
but I
definitely
mean,
human.
maybe Philip K. Dick is saying like, that's kind of, even if some people have less of this quality, it's a defining quality to be empathetic to like something that can't give you something, right? Like if you're empathetic to
Right.
like, he gets a goat. It is a goat he gets later in the
He gets a
book,
goat.
right?
He has an electric
Yeah.
sheep and then he gets a goat later.
And so it could be like, even if someone doesn't have a lot of that quality, that's a quality that, imagine a machine is trying to make a fake human. That's something it
Mhm.
wouldn't program in because it's not like an immediate benefit, right? It's not like, so say we're in like, some other kind of thing like Terminator world where there's some something that becomes self-aware and replicates itself
Right.
or something like that, it would never need to program in empathy. I feel like
Yeah.
that's kind of a very big theme of the book, is that
But do you
empathy
think-
is a fundamentally human thing, right?
But do you think he's saying that empathy is not necessary and that's why it's not programmed? Or do you think he's saying that empathy is like impossible to program? Because I kind of got the impression that
Oh
they're
yeah.
like trying to fool people with these androids to some extent, but they for some reason can't program empathy, which every time I hear one of these things in science fiction, I'm like, if your brain can do it, a computer can do it. There's no difference. It's just a really complicated computer. So why the hell couldn't you program empathy into an android? That kind of always falls flat for me. It's like, I think a lot of people just think there's something magical about the human brain. It couldn't be copied by a machine. And I'm like, I don't buy that. I don't buy that at all.
I think that was a Dr. Katz episode where some guy was like, I was thinking the other day that the brain is just the most incredible part of the body. But then I was like, oh, wait a second, look at what's telling me that. Right. Yeah, exactly. The brain's like, you know what the best part of your body is? The brain.
Right here. You know what I don't understand is, like, in the Middle Ages, people used to believe that the consciousness was seated in your heart. How are you not?
I think Aristotle believed that, didn't he?
But are you not experiencing your thoughts in your head? I do. That's where my thoughts are. They're in my head. Like, I'm not like, oh, there's a message coming in from my foot. Like, how do you? I don't get that. There must be some really there's some really complicated theories. There's this one called the bifurcated mind theory, where people used to not experience the consciousness the way we do. It's really complicated. It's kind of hokey. I'm not like a big fan of it, but maybe there's some idea out there that, like, only because we know about the brain is why we experience it in our heads. But I'm like, I don't think so. I remember being like a little tiny kid, and I was definitely thinking in my head. I was not thinking with like other parts of my body. That
I guess it makes the most sense, because that's where a lot of the perception is done, right? Like, your eyes and your ears and
the sensory
kind of
stuff.
Like, so you're maybe like,
well, you can
it
feel
makes sense that the thoughts are closest to that, but you feel everywhere, right? So
you feel everywhere.
Things that are more localized or around.
So one thing we haven't done yet is on this podcast we drink a drink that's related to. So this is your choice. This book is your choice. So the drink is your choice, but I had to go ahead of time. Usually it's a surprise for the person that's having it foisted upon them, but in this case that doesn't work. So what are we drinking first of these two things you chose?
So I'm really, really sorry about this.
Are we actually going to drink one of these things that you chose? Because it's painful.
Can we drink maybe just a little bit of it?
Yeah, I think that's probably the way to go. I don't think we want to. What was your brand, by the way?
So I got a Heineken.
Wait, we're just having a beer. Actually, we're just having a beer is what we're doing, right? I'm going to open this up, and what we're going to do is I have a Guinness, you have a Heineken. We're both going to drink a beer. Perfectly normal, non-replicant, nothing strange about this beer, except that it tastes really bad, because what's the gimmick?
The gimmick is that it's a non-alcoholic beer. So
yeah, and it is just not the same as the real thing. It is really not. Actually,
you know what?
Say,
mine tastes like a Heineken. I don't really like how Heineken tastes very much, but mine does taste like a Heineken.
This doesn't taste like a Guinness, but it does have like a chocolatey aftertaste that's not unpleasant. That's really weird. Premium non-alcoholic malt beverage from the makers of Guinness.
Yeah, so I don't think it's supposed to replicate Guinness, because it doesn't have like
it doesn't taste anything like Guinness or anything. No. It's not an unpleasant drink. I was talking to the guy when I bought this. I was thinking, well, it does have 0.5 alcohol per volume. So I was trying to think, hey, you're my math guy. How many of those do I have to drink to feel like I had, I don't know, 2 beers, right? It's got to be like 20, give or take. Well,
yeah, but
like a Coors Light is like 4%, right? So I'd need 8 of these. I'd need 16 of these to feel like I drank 2 Coors Lights, which doesn't feel like anything. So I don't know why.
But I think there's also something about the dilution of alcohol in other liquid. Like if you drink,
right? Well, isn't that what 0.5% means?
Yeah, but it's if you ingest 10 of these calibers, right, then you have 10 times the actual stuff that you've ingested and the same amount of alcohol. So this is the same reason that 80 proof liquor is more dangerous, because
It just gets
doesn't
absorbed.
come with all the extra stuff. Exactly.
Just gets absorbed faster is what you're saying.
Yeah.
I get that. I can see that. That's a meritable hypothesis. I'll grant that. I think that might be true. I don't know.
Honestly, if I were at like a dinner or something and someone gave me this Heineken and didn't tell me it was like non-alcoholic, I probably wouldn't know.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody, well, you know what? So there's this Russian drink called kvass, which is like,
I've had it.
Kind of like it's kind of like what you'd make beer from, basically.
Yeah.
And it's kind of bubbly. This is a lot like that. This tastes like drinking a kvass, which, it's okay. It's not something I would choose to drink on a regular basis.
So I apologize for the drink choice, but obviously I thought it was kind of like a good metaphor, because you're drinking this thing. It tastes like a beer. It looks like a beer.
Right.
But there's something that's just missing. And I won't make the obvious pun with like spirit or something, because you could make that pun, but
I'm not getting it. So make it. Go for it. Dad jokes.
No, I mean, I don't think it's like the thing that makes a human.
Oh,
human
you're saying
like a spirit, and then also alcoholic spirit or something
right.
like that.
So the spirit, the ghost in the machine. But I think spirits and all right.
Yeah, but I think like the idea being that obviously we know what makes this different from a regular beer is there's no alcohol in it. It's kind of like there's in the book they talk about these intangible qualities that make people different from inauthentic people. Do we have to drink the whole thing? I would vote for no.
I mean,
but
it's kind of a dirty secret about alcoholic beverages is that we learn as we get older. We learn to actually appreciate the taste of some alcoholic beverages. Like I like certain wines, I like good cocktails, I like a good beer, but frankly, I wouldn't drink them if they didn't have alcohol in them. They don't taste that good. I wouldn't just sit around drinking beer, just for the taste of beer if there wasn't a little bit of alcohol in it. That's definitely part of the point. I think most people try to pretend that's not the case. They're like, oh no, I just enjoy the taste of it. I'm like, well, then you could drink anything.
If you were running on a hot day or something and you had a cold non-alcoholic beer at the end of the run, if you were given the choice between that and water
is awfully good when I'm hot. I live in the desert. How is it? It's not nowhere near as arid where you are as it is here, right? Like you guys are. No, it's probably pretty humid.
It gets pretty humid. Yeah.
Okay. But if I go out for a run and I come back here, I want water. That's what I want to drink. Like it's. Yeah, well, you know what? I was thinking about the whole Mars thing with this book, but you're saying that Total Recall, they don't even go to Mars in the book. So there's no connection there.
This one,
no, it's Mars.
Go to the moon, right?
No, it's Mars.
Oh, it is Mars? Okay.
All the androids are from Mars. Because I was wondering, is this before people had sent the first probes to Mars and learned that Mars was just rocks?
Yeah, definitely.
It's got to be, right?
Yeah.
It must have been before. Well, it's 1968, but it's close. So I feel like that's in the early 70s where they sent Mariner.
I think so.
Things like that to Mars. So Robert Heinlein's book Red Planet, which is from the 50s, I think it's not much older than this. It's all about a green Mars where there's plants growing everywhere and stuff. And immediately became obsolete not long after the book was written. So we were talking about
what's the story what's the story about it was a mistranslation or something about the canals of Mars? I can't remember that, but
it's this guy,
they used to think that Mars had actual canals on it,
it's there was this guy named Schiaparelli who was one of the first people to look at Mars in detail, and he just convinced himself he was seeing lines on the surface of Mars, and it was almost like pareidolia, where you kind of see your brain kind of, it's like you remember the face on Mars that everybody used to talk about. It's just some rocks laying together, but the human mind imprints a shape onto it, a pattern onto it, and that's pareidolia. So I think that's what Schiaparelli and those early guys were doing. They were just seeing lines and creating an idea. I mean, he had maps of the canals that he could see, and other people were going and corroborating his maps of the canals, making little corrections to them and stuff. And there's
crazy.
Absolutely nothing there. There's nothing that even looks like a canal on the surface of Mars. So people just peer pressure, I think, or suggestion, the power of suggestion.
Yes, I think suggestion.
Yeah. We were talking about how Clint is always saying how you should never tell somebody tasting notes on a wine or a beer or whatever, because if you do, there's just no chance they're not going to taste that. You have to just let people taste it for themselves, because that suggestion is pretty powerful. So Well, how old were you when you first read this book?
I think I was actually out of college, so maybe 22
Okay.
or so. When we graduated college, I think the same year.
We were around
And
at the same time, but I don't remember if we graduated at the same time.
Yeah, so right after college, I moved down to Charlottesville, where I just kind of stayed with some friends and was unemployed. And I was reading a lot of Kurt Vonnegut at the time.
Nice.
And a friend of a friend said, if you like Kurt Vonnegut, you really should read Philip K. Dick, because Philip K. Dick is essentially Kilgore Trout, right? This like character that Kurt Vonnegut sort of is like a more Kurt Vonnegut version of Kurt Vonnegut himself, right? That science fiction writer that's in all the not all.
Yeah,
of books,
quite
a few.
I remember him from Breakfast of Champions.
Yeah.
I don't think he's in Slaughterhouse 5, right? Or is that the guy that he writes about being in Dresden in Slaughterhouse 5 is Kilgore Trout?
I don't think so.
I don't think so, right? I remember him from Breakfast of Champions. But
anyway,
why is that like Philip K. Dick? What do you think is like? How is that?
I think Kurt Vonnegut was kind of amazing because he really found his way into the mainstream, but he is a science fiction writer, right? A lot of his books are very, without the, there are obviously science fiction books that are just very, cliche and like, the robots versus, I don't know, the vampires or something like that.
Yeah,
maybe that's not a book.
That's 1,000 times. 1,000 times that's been done. Yeah. I'm really tired of watching that, honestly.
Yeah. I think one thing about Philip K. Dick and one thing about this book in particular. So I recently reread this book as part of a book club, and we had read other, this is definitely the most kind of, or the least classic thing so far in the book club. So we've read Brothers Karamazov, which I'd read before, but it's just such a brilliant book.
I read
Of Human Bondage.
I read Crime and Punishment. I never read Brothers Karamazov. I read.
Oh, Brothers Karamazov is. So I got so much more when I read it the second time. So in this book group, we read a lot of very classic books. A lot of people would put Brothers Karamazov up there as maybe the best novel ever written, right? And what kind of surprised me is that this book, it wasn't like, obviously it's not a world classic in the same way that Brothers Karamazov is, but it does still have deep themes, right? I mean, it does still have deep themes. It's not like you read one book and there are all these important kind of subtle themes, and then you read this and it's like, who's going to win, the robot or the bounty hunter? It's really about
there's a lot
kind
going
of deceptively on. It's kind of deceptive in that way. There are a lot of subtle themes in it, and so I thought that was kind of it.
One of the things that caught me is how there's this character who's the chicken head, right? Isidore.
Yeah, J.R. Isidore. Yeah.
So I kept thinking about that character, and it was only towards the end of the book that I realized that the cruelty with which everybody treats this guy completely turns on the head the idea that everyone's so empathic in this world.
Yeah.
Because they're treating this human being who's like, and I didn't even really think he sounded all that much less intelligent than a normal person from the way he was written. I think it was just kind of got branded with these ideas. It was completely unfair. And like he was just getting crapped on in a way that proved that the empathic thing is not what's going on. There's something else going on. I didn't really.
Also, it doesn't say a lot about the people that they're very, like you said, they're empathetic towards animals because the animals are valuable, right? But like, not valuable because he's just another human, right? He's
first of all, they're scarce. They're scarce, right? So that's part of it. But also, just there's that catalog, the Sydney's catalog, that tells you exactly. He has this spider, and he's like, oh, that was worth like $100. How could you destroy it?
Yeah.
And when the goat gets pushed off the roof, she's just like, oh, the waste. She's not like really hurt about the goat being dead. She hardly got time to get attached to the goat. I didn't understand at first. Maybe the first 50 or 60 pages, I was like, what is he talking about with the way these people talk about animals? I did not understand what was going on with that. I was like, what do you want a goat for? Why do you want an electric sheep? None of it made a lot of sense to me. So
well, it kind of reminds me a bit of like, right. I think Emerson has that quote where if we only saw the stars like once every 100 years, it would be like this huge event, right?
Right.
And so animals are absolutely incredible. It's just we have a lot of them, so we obviously we kind of become desensitized to how amazing they are. So if anything, the scarcity helps them appreciate like, oh my God, I have this goat. Like this is an incredible incredible animal, right?
Yeah, moving out to New Mexico has kind of taught me that, like, when I was younger and I'd come out to places like this, I'd see the mountains and the landscapes, and I'd just be like blown away. I'd be like, oh, this is amazing. I've never seen anything like it, And there's still that sense when you live here, but it dulls. You're not getting that excited every time you see the mountain range. And it's like, we grew up in DC, and I always just took that for granted. I mean, not really. I always enjoyed going to the museums and stuff. I did, but it didn't blow my mind the way it would if I was from here originally. I would have gone to DC and been like, oh my God, the Smithsonian. I've never seen it. I'm kind of like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I go and I visit the museums, and it's pretty amazing to see them. So you can definitely take pretty wonderful things for granted if you're desensitized to them.
I think also another thing is the kind of craziness that happens with Mercer at the end.
What is happening in the last bit when he gets out of the car and he gets hit in the head by something, finds the mechanical toad? What is going on in that scene? Because it sort of says to me that the Mercerism thing is not fake, because he has some kind of legit experience, right?
Well, it's actually it reminds me a lot of Brothers Karamazov, where Brothers Karamazov, there are a lot of things that happen in it that kind of are sort of allegories for faith in a way, like something where a character can't be sure that something happened, but they kind of think that that's the way like the world should be. And so they sort of have this faith that's not backed up by something empirical. And Dostoevsky he seems like he's very against, there being empirical justifications for faith, right? He's very against people saying like, this is why I believe in this certain, belief structure, and there's empirical proof for it. He's very against that. And so I think, a lot of the book is what makes humans human, and what are the sort of intangibles of being human. And one thing is, humans throughout the world have faith in various forms. And what Mercer kind of symbolizes is sort of that transcendent experience, right? And I think it's made even more kind of, pointed by the fact that that other show claims to like have disproven it and said like, oh, we found this studio where they're faking the Mercer or the empathy box thing.
But they're fake, right? Buster Friendly's an android.
We don't know. We don't know.
No, I think he's saying that Buster Friendly and the people that visit him are androids because they don't age. They're broadcast from somewhere. Like he was asking all these questions about it that I was like, oh, okay. So that's what I thought he was saying.
Now that you mention it, there's, not to get off topic, but there's I think he intentionally doesn't say whether Phil Resch is an android.
Phil Resch, right? Right.
Yeah, they sit down and they do the empathy test.
Deckard definitely decides that he's not an android. Deckard brings him up later on in the book as an example of a human that can't feel empathy for androids, and that's why there's something wrong with that guy Resch. I don't know if the author passes judgment on it. I think Deckard definitely is saying he's definitely not an android. From the test that he took.
Yeah, but at the moment, it's kind of ambiguous at the moment, right?
It is. It definitely is at the moment. Yeah. But I think he seemed to have made a decision about it afterwards. That part was weird. That was a different
police station part,
yeah,
you mean?
I almost think that Deckard might be an android in the book. I almost think that whole setup with the fake building and everything might be saying that he's got false memories. Because that part really did kind of throw me off. I was like, wait a minute, what's it? It all just got really surreal here. There's a whole setup of a fake other building, and am I supposed to believe that, or is that something in Deckard's head? I don't know. I don't think
it seems like a lot of stuff to set up just to fool this one guy, right? Why set it up as a police station?
A whole building to protect 6 androids. Or maybe there's more androids than that. That's another idea. It may be saying that there's androids just running rampant. They're all over the place. There's a whole like shadow,
true.
City of androids that are setting up, these kind of scams and stuff. Because how did that girl get to be an opera singer and stuff like that? How did that happen? She just worked her way into that.
I don't know. How long were they there? I don't think they were even there that long, right?
I don't think they're supposed to have been there for more than a couple of weeks or something. I think it's a short term.
Yeah.
thing.
So how did she? Well, they're just like open auditions or something, and she just.
Well, the Resch thing in the Resch sequence where he's at the fake police station, that guy's been there for years.
Yeah. I can't remember
police,
but his
police
his chief.
Yeah. So there's definitely more androids running around than just a couple of them. I think it may be sort of.
What's that?
Have you ever heard the term harness bull?
No, I hadn't.
What in that one? And then a word I never want to hear again is elevated. Like people get off an elevator and he's like, they elevator. And I was like, never again. We're not using that word. Like they got off the elevator. We're good there. Like I was even thinking like, were elevators new in 1968? Why was he saying that? Where did that come from? Like just out of total left field. They're not even. Elevators have been around for like 50 years at the time. It's not.
Yeah. It also seems really weird that, Philip K. Dick is writing about androids and replicants and stuff. And then he's journeys to Mars and stuff. And then he's really like enthralled by an elevator. Like,
right.
Whoa, what is this thing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Speaking of things that have lasted for 50 years, do we have to finish this? Because I don't know if I can.
Let's not finish it.
Let's pop the real drink that we got for the podcast today. So you suggested that they drink, I think, Chablis in one part.
Yeah. So if you remember, J.R. Isidore brings in Chablis that he's been storing, and he shares it with the androids, right? So
yes, and it's probably worth who knows how much in this world, right?
If I'm allowed to like maybe read too much into symbolism of stuff,
yes, you are.
Okay, good. What he's sharing with the androids is, it could be argued that like, winemaking is kind of a very human thing. Well, androids have no reason to like ferment things and drink them, right? Whereas, look at all the energy that's.
I wasn't clear on whether.
Maybe it does.
I wasn't clear on whether they could eat and drink, and I guess they could because they talk about eating.
Yeah.
He brings them some food, so they may metabolize alcohol the same way as people do. They may get drunk.
Would they have the same? But would they have the same, preference for like, this is a Chablis or this is, a Chardonnay? Or would they care about that as much?
If Pris was it Pris? Is she the one that's on the opera? If they could learn to be an opera singer,
why couldn't they learn? Is the one.
Luba Luft, you're right.
Opera, yeah.
If they could learn to do that, why couldn't they learn to appreciate wine too?
I guess that's true.
By that extension,
fancy things.
Why couldn't you program them to have empathy? I'm going back to that again because that just bothers me. I don't understand why you couldn't just write that program. That seems probably because he doesn't have much of a concept of this being a computer.
Yeah.
1968. I'm not sure because think about all the other things that are going on in this world that should be computerized or electronic that aren't. There's a whole bunch of things that are more like there's like a laser tube. There's a couple of household objects that clearly. Roy Batty sets up a tripwire kind of thing. Remember that?
Yeah, that's right.
And when he's talking about that, it's clearly not a computerized system. There's no computer involved in that. So I think Philip K. Dick has, at least in this book, no conception of like miniaturized electronics and computers, and is just completely skipping. So I think maybe it's just the idea that you could program empathy just doesn't make sense or something. Like that I think also just Philip K. Dick likes the idea of technology not being able to reach certain things. Like in some of his other books, they have like, machines that can replicate anything. Mm-hmm. And so this makes currency kind of impossible, right? Because you get like $100 bill and you replicate it, 10 million times, right? So it turns out the only things that machines can't replicate for whatever reason are like truffle skins. And so people pay for things in truffle skins in this world, right? So, okay.
So I think he likes that as a theme. Like you can do something that's almost a complete simulacrum of something, but there's always going to be just one tiny, thing missing.
There's a lot of that. And it's not just in science fiction, but like, for instance, in Harry Potter, there's like a whole character who's based around the idea that some of the wizards are fascinated with Muggle technology. So it's like an opportunity to bring Muggle technology into things a bunch of times. It's almost like the author thinks that you'll be comforted by having some normal stuff around. So it's like you have like a place where the technology can't go in a sci-fi book, like in Dune, for instance. In Dune, they have these, laser weapons and like energy shields and stuff. And they discover that if you use artillery, you can get through the energy shields. And it's like, it's almost like the author just feels comforted by like, oh yeah, well, something from the 20th century is just as good as your, future tech. Like
Yeah.
You know, and there's a lot of that. That's not the only place where that happens, I think. There's a lot of sort of is atavistic the right word? It's like atavistic technology in some of these books that sort of is like a throwback to something you're like, I'm not sure that would still be there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think there is something comforting, right, about, there's something that's very unnerving about, technology and replication of things. And so I think a lot of what Philip K. Dick is kind of, shooting for is the idea that there'll always be something that has to remain authentic kind of throughout.
Yeah. Which is a comforting thought to me, but I don't think it's necessarily true. I think every time I see like a little kid with an iPad that like never leaves looking at the iPad, I'm like, I like the world a lot better when people have to put those things down every once in a while, but I just don't think that's where things are going. I think people are going to be looking at them constantly in the future. I'd like to be wrong about that, but
it's kind of a natural progression, right? Like, you just look at things more and more, and they're engineered to get you to look at them more and more. Right. So any kind of pushing against, looking at screens, with increasing frequency is kind of like someone who, the first like personal computer, the Apple comes out, and they're like, I'm still going to use the typewriter. And it's like, you can do that, but you're still, you're not going to stem the tide of like personal computers coming. Right.
I mean, I've mentioned it to friends a couple of times that have like young kids, and I'm like, I really try not to let them use screens. I mean, at least not iPads and things like that, because I think it's kind of an addictive behavior. And people look at me like I'm crazy. They're just like, oh no, they need to know about computers. Here's the iPad to the kid. And I'm like, maybe I am crazy. I don't know, but it doesn't seem like something I want to give to my kids. Like,
well, I think there's a very real.
Is that you making that noise, or do you have an
cat? That's a cat, an electric cat that's been programmed to ask for food at exactly 10:30. Yeah, I think there's, and maybe this is something that people are looking at, but I think there's actually a very physiological thing that happens when people are so kind of tuned into screens. And one time we were at a pizza place in Memphis, and there was a little girl who was sitting on, like the kid seats that go on top of regular seats at a restaurant.
A booster seat.
It's like a plastic, thank you. A booster seat. And so she was looking at it.
I have kids. These objects aren't just like foreign things that I never talk about. They're actually part of my life.
Yeah. I'm like, what is this amazing thing I read about in a book somewhere? You're like
small versions of adults, Jay.
Okay. But so she was sitting on a booster seat. We're at this pizza place, and she was watching her iPad, or she was playing a game on her iPad.
Mm-hmm.
And the booster seat like wasn't secured to the seat, so it fell off, and she fell to the side and fell onto like the tile ground.
I need to know now whether I can laugh at this. Does this kid end up hurt, or can I laugh?
The kid is not hurt. Okay. You're allowed to laugh.
Then I'm snickering a little bit. Okay.
So they pick her back up. So she falls, off the chair and falls like on her side. And they pick her up. They're like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Yes." And they put her back on the booster seat and then secure it. And then, but the punchline is that the entire time, because I saw it, the entire time her eyes were fixed on the iPad, like literally during the fall, which has got to be
like in defiance of all evolutionary logic.
Exactly. Like
not trying to save herself at all. Yeah,
millions of years of evolution, just like in 10 years with an iPad is just totally undone. Because I still remember what she looked like, falling literally on her side, and her eyes were glued the entire time. Right.
Sometimes I think it's like, okay, I'm crazy. I'm just an old guy. I don't like change. But then other times I'm like, maybe it's gonna be a generation from now, it'll be like people look at it the way they'd look at you. Like, there's some things that happened in the 50s where they'd put a kid in front of the TV and they'd watch TV all day, and they'd eat a TV dinner while watching the TV. And we look back at that and we're like, oh my God, they weren't thinking about their kids at all. Like 30 years from now, we're going to look back and be like, do you remember when people used to just hand their kids an iPad and let them watch it all day with no care about the addictive traits of that thing? I don't know. I could go at it. I really can't predict the future very well, but it seems to me like that kind of seems like we're going to be sorry that we let kids have that much access to it. I mean, And I see people I know people are like single parents and stuff like that, and they just need to keep the kids quiet for a few minutes. And I get that. Try not to be judgmental about that, but I don't think it's good for kids.
It's easy to say like, okay, well, this is a new technology, and we're not going to kind of fall into the trap of like really fully embracing it. But not to bring up the pandemic again, but think about how much think about how much your own viewpoint has changed over the year of the pandemic. Like now, I'll be watching a show from pre-pandemic, and like one person will be talking like 2 inches from someone else's face, and I'm like, what are you doing? Or like someone will go and hug like 4 people, and I'll be like,
or they just get up and
do that.
They just get up and leave the house and go to someplace, and nobody puts on a mask. I just have that thought in the back of my head, like, where's your mask? What are you doing? What are you doing? We went to, so Texas is like completely open. Maybe Oklahoma is too. I don't know.
Yeah,
but we went. I'm vaccinated. Karina's fully vaccinated. So we went to a game, AAA game, the Chihuahuas down in El Paso, and we got there, and it's outdoors. Karina and I took off our masks because we're outdoors, and my son wouldn't take his off. He was like freaking out about taking his mask off. And Karina was like, I'm a doctor. I'm telling you, you're not going to get sick outdoors. Like, you're going to be fine. And he was like really uncomfortable. And I was like, man, what have we done to this kid? Like, he's like all paranoid about this now. I felt kind of bad about it.
How old is he?
He's 10.
You just said, but he's 10.
He's 10.
So he's been wearing a mask like
20% of his life. Yeah, exactly. Right? And my daughter
just
5.
Remembers from 5. Yeah.
My daughter's 5. So, I mean, she's even more so. Although she's a less cautious personality.
So to bring up the book again,
we probably should.
So what's your interpretation of what happens with Mercer? Because I think that's like an intentionally very vague and kind of very almost psychedelic part.
So what exactly happens? So what happens is he gets done with all the androids and stuff. Is it before he goes and sleeps for a really long time? It is, right? He's still kind of fried from the experience dealing with the androids. He's been awake for like 24 hours straight. So he drives up to like the Oregon border in his hover car, parks the hover car in sort of a wasteland area, goes walking up a hill, and has kind of an experience of the Mercer thing, what everybody else sees on the.
But he does fuse with Mercer, or like has right when he's taking on the androids in Isidore's apartment.
He does when he's at home with his wife, right?
No, Mercer appears to him there, and like Mercer like helps him.
Oh, right. When he goes into the courtyard, and Mercer shows up and tells him Roy Batty's like coming out the door to attack. Oh no. The Rachel Rosen one is coming after him. That's right. I didn't 100% understand what's going on there either. I think maybe what's going on is that his empathy's been opened up by the connection with Rachel Rosen, because he's saying he's going to have a hard time doing this job after that experience. And so the Mercer thing is a metaphor for your empathic connection.
It does seem like a religious experience though, right? It does seem like, he has this sort of kind of experience of this kind of great figure who's helping him in his journey, right? And
it's connected to the opening of the empathy within him. So maybe he's saying that because that's what the Mercer thing is about. It's people bonding with each other and empathizing with each other. I don't know. Honestly, I kind of was left a little bit like, what just happened here? I didn't really understand it. And then the toad is fake. What's the toad doing there?
That's so brutal. Like that's such a. So here's kind of a question that I think is interesting about science fiction books, because I love some science fiction books. I love a lot of books that are considered more kind of
like, I know you're a big
classic,
Battlefield
like
you're a big Battlefield Earth fan, right?
I love Battlefield Earth 1, 2, and then Battlefield Earth. Yeah, and then Battlefield Earth 5, back to Battlefield Earth, and Son of Battlefield Earth, and then
Search for Battlefield Earth.
Search for Battlefield Earth is another one. Have you ever read Battlefield Earth? I've never read any L. Ron Hubbard.
No.
I kind of want to read it to see, like,
I think, didn't they say that Philip K. Dick was like hugely influenced by L. Ron Hubbard?
I think it was Heinlein or something like that. I think
it was L. Ron Hubbard. Really? There was a book. Yeah, it was a book. I wrote it down because I was like, oh, is that a good book? And I can't remember. I can't find it really quick, but there was definitely a book by L. Ron Hubbard that was like a big influence on him.
Possibly. I mean, he was a well-known sci-fi guy before
he lost his mind, I think.
Yeah.
Either that, or it's just a what do you call it? Like a con. I don't know if it's a con or whether he really believed.
I mean, there's a maybe apocryphal story of Robert Heinlein betting. Maybe it wasn't Robert Heinlein. It was one of those sci-fi guys betting L. Ron Hubbard that he couldn't start a religion or something like that.
Yeah, I've heard that story, but is that true?
I don't know how true it is. I think what's interesting is, you know, someone like Kurt Vonnegut, right, who's written very obvious sci-fi books.
Oh yeah, here it is.
Like
sorry to interrupt you.
Sorry.
So it's in writing this novel, Dick was inspired, as his writing was in general, by the writing of L. Ron Hubbard. Hubbard's novella Fear was a horror story that made you feel disjointed from reality itself. So it's kind of like the idea of like the sort of themes and the feel of this book, which I'm like, L. Ron Hubbard, you mean the Scientology guy? Like, I was kind of surprised.
I was thinking about sort of how weird things are with genres, because Philip K. Dick, right, he is definitely classified as science fiction. And I think recently a lot more literary people like Jonathan Lethem, who's like a big, you know, he's the guy that wrote Motherless Brooklyn, and he's well known in kind of like, you know, literary circles and stuff. He's been really into Philip K. Dick. And so Philip K. Dick is getting attention from people that, you know, maybe wouldn't normally read science fiction. But there is sort of a weird kind of, you know, this genre bias where Kurt Vonnegut is considered good normal literature. He's not filed in science fiction.
No.
Right.
No,
like he's
really,
like, if you know, if people still went to Barnes and Nobles to get their books, right, he wouldn't be in the science fiction section. He would be in, I think,
I got this book at Barnes and Noble.
Really?
I went there and they didn't have it, but then they were like, wait, no, the computer says we have one copy of it. And it was arriving in a box that morning. Like somehow they had just ordered that book, and I bought it like as soon as it came out of the box. There's probably going to be 20 of them there tomorrow, because they're going to see their numbers going to be like, wow, these things are selling 10 seconds after we open the box. Like
one per minute. So we'll get, you know,
100% of these books have sold within a minute. So
yeah, it's kind of it's a very strange thing with genres, and really also just, I think the way we look at art in general is the fact that we take Philip K. Dick and we say he's science fiction. We put him in the science fiction section among, like you said, things that are a lot more cliche. But Kurt Vonnegut, who's written some Kurt Vonnegut books, could almost be Philip K. Dick books, right? Like,
sure, yeah, Cat's Cradle, I think it's something like that.
Cat's Cradle, Slapstick, maybe.
I don't know that one.
No, maybe that's not the right. Is Cat's Cradle the one with Ice Nine the thing that freezes everything? Yeah. So that's
sort of a sci-fi concept. Yeah, he leans more into the humorous and like especially dark humorous implications of the science fiction ideas he's got than most science fiction does. Vonnegut, I'm saying. Yeah. Like there's definitely more of a focus on like the dark humor of these things, and the just sort of this is a little bit more like, I mean, it's dystopian, and I don't think Kurt Vonnegut makes much of an attempt to make it feel real. Do you know what I mean? Like any kind of actual prediction of the future. This one's actually kind of grounded in reality to some extent. So it sort of feels like at least one version of what the future could be. It's not like ludicrous. You know, I mean, it's not, I don't know if it fires on all cylinders. It seems kind of plausible.
But I think Philip K. Dick does, you know, he has the status as kind of like a writer that lots of writers like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so for that reason, you know, there was an episode of The Simpsons. Did you ever see the episode where Homer switches back and forth between a Lego world and then his regular world?
No. So if I did, I don't remember it.
Well, it looks like the Lego movie, right? So there's a world he's in that's like a Lego world, and then there's a world that's, you know, regular Simpsons world. Okay. And in that they play a game that's actually, and they never mention Philip K. Dick, but the game is named after a game in a Philip K. Dick book.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is like, and it's called Perky Pats, so it couldn't be from anything else. It must be
that's a reference
to that.
Not a coincidence.
So I get Yeah, I get the feel, and this is from a book that's not one of his better known books, called The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch.
Okay.
And so I get the feeling that like a lot of writers, you know,
Yeah,
really look to Philip K.
sure.
Dick for kind of like a genre defining person in a way, right?
Speaking of things that definitely can't be coincidences, I was my parents would watch like old 70s TV shows when I'd come and visit, and they were watching Chips. And the Chips guys like get on the radio and they're like reporting where they're headed, and they're like, "This is Unit 7 Mary 3, like headed over there." And I was like, "Wait a minute." That's a band. It's like a really lousy band. That they must have gotten their name from like the call sign of the guys on Chips. I was like, there's no way that's an accident, but why?
So
why
weird.
are those two things connected? So
that's a very weird band name inspiration too, right?
exactly. And in the days before the internet, it's not like people could just Google 7 Mary 3, where'd that come from? You'd know in a second. Today you'd be like, oh, it's a reference to Chips. But like back then, I actually had to just catch it on TV, and I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. So I don't
prior to the internet, I think it was a lot easier to make obscure references, right? You could be like, this is what we called our band. You'll never figure this out. And nowadays, right, you could just Google it and you're like,
exactly. It actually has to just be surreal today. Otherwise, people will know exactly what you're talking about. You just have to select 5 words and string them together. So
it's not shown towards animals, but like you said, it is shown in the book towards J.R. Isidore, how people are like, objectively horrible to him, right?
Right. Maybe like there's some kind of conservation of meanness. Like if you're nice to animals.
Yeah, if you're nice to animals, then you have to be mean to like...
right.
I think in a way, Philip K. Dick has a very pessimistic view of human nature, right? Even though he does talk about empathy as kind of a defining characteristic. There's a very particular reason that he has J.R. Isidore in there, right? He doesn't have to make him this guy who's sort of mistreated. And you see him even at work, and, excuse me, everyone at work is like, this guy's a chicken head. He's an idiot, right?
Right.
And
he finds companionship with the androids because they share that. They're like not considered people, and not for much good reason.
They just don't see, like, I don't think it even enters into their mind that he's different than the other people, right? They just see him, right? They're not like, we'll be social or cordial to you because you're in this sort of marginalized group, right? They're just friendly to him because he's there, right? So in a weird way, they show more empathy towards him than other humans have. But of course,
they're pretty cold. They're a little cold. They're a little cold towards him. And the one android they actually differ. That's the weird thing. The androids differ in how they respond to him. Some of them seem to be more empathic towards him. And like Roy Batty keeps calling him a chicken head, and everybody else is like, hey, you really shouldn't say that. That's not cool,
he does. He does. I forgot about that. Yeah.
So there's sort of like a difference between the androids, and I wonder what that's trying to say. Yeah, I think I think Philip K. Dick talks about empathy in this book, but I don't think he's necessarily saying it's such a universal trait of humans. I think he's almost kind of like saying the opposite, kind of making a farce of the idea that it's innate with being human. That you learn what to be empathic for.
Something that Philip K. Dick has in common with a lot of like classically great writers is that he's kind of okay in pointing out contradictions, right? He's, he definitely points out the contradiction that people are, they're empathetic towards like, a turtle that they buy that costs money, and then they treat J.R. Isidore like crap, right? Because and so I think he's okay pointing that out and pointing out, kind of the weird contradictions and having empathy for other animals or other people, right?
Yeah, I mean, and there's historic context for that too. There's like the way the founding fathers talked about, the equality of man and trying to be empathic towards their fellow man, but they literally meant men, and they definitely didn't mean anybody who wasn't white. And like,
absolutely,
they just had no empathy towards. Well, it's not fair to say they had no empathy towards enslaved people. I think they did. Some of the better ones did realize it was a contradiction, and they were grappling with it. But none of them considered women at all. They were just like, that's just not what we're doing here. So it's like there's boundaries. Like I said, like empathy is like a learned behavior. It's like a cultural construct. There's like some people that you're empathic for, and nobody is kind towards the chicken head guy. First, let me call him a chicken head. Like, that's That's hard to imagine. I guess we have a pretty, nominally empathic society today, at least with the way we talk.
Actually, it's kind of like applicable to discussions, these days about things like racism and social justice, where real empathy you can't yell at someone and be like, have empathy for this group, right? Because empathy is a very organic kind of natural feeling, right? So I think there might be a lot of people who are like, I should empathize with these people, I should empathize with someone who's going through something. But it really is, the feeling of empathy is a very personal experience, right?
I think so.
And like you said, it is learned, right? You can't be like, hey, you guys, you should have empathy for this group of people or something like that.
Right.
And that way, I guess it is very human, right? It's a very personal experience having empathy for someone or some,
And you usually have it for in-groups, right? It's usually reserved for your in-group in some way. You pretty much feel empathy for people outside I don't know if that's really, I think maybe some people aren't capable of feeling empathy for people outside their in-group. I was thinking, like, you see kids, sick kids from anywhere in the world, people empathize with them, we empathize with animals, that aren't even human. You see them have something bad. I don't know. And I don't know what's going on with the Mercerism thing. So I'm at a little bit of a loss. We just did an episode on Akira, and my friend was like, "So what do you think happened at the end of Akira?" And I was just like, "I don't know." I'm just kind of, give me your theory. I really don't know. So did you tell what is your theory of the last sequence with Mercerism and the toad?
Well, I think it's like he, at the beginning, right, Mercer kind of came to him almost as this like supernatural vision, right, when he's fighting the androids, and Mercer like saves his life,
right,
because he tells him where I can't remember exactly what
think
happens,
it's real. You think there's a real experience there of some kind?
Yeah, I mean,
is it possibly implanted?
I guess maybe. I mean, at least the the times I've read the book, I've thought that it was kind of, because I don't think Philip K. Dick really deals too much in unreliable narrators or things like that.
Okay.
But
I didn't get you. That's why I was saying, when I was saying that Deckard seems to decide that Resh is not an android, I sort of took it at face value. Like I was like, like you said, I don't think this is an unreliable narrator thing. If it is, it's a really, really sequestered, unreliable narrator, like as in Deckard as the replicant, or an android. I'm sorry, replicants from the movie. And they went with that in the film. So their idea for that must have come from somewhere. It does get mentioned. They do ask him one time, have you ever thought about you being a replicant? God, I keep saying an android. He's like, yeah, I took the test one time a long time ago. And the guy's like, are you sure you don't have a memory implanted of having that? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, but it could be. So,
well, and also the fact that you're, throughout the book is the idea that some androids can pass the test also, because as you said, how hard would it be to just program certain empathetic responses?
Don't we just kind of categorically learn that none of the androids can pass the test?
I thought in the beginning there was a discussion about older tests, right? Because they're talking about like the Nexus 6
there is,
or whatever.
But as far as I can tell, the Voight-Kampf test is still able to defeat even the Nexus 6 androids, from what they're talking about in the book. At the beginning, he's talking about, this latest brain is going to surpass our test, but we'll have to develop a new test. But every time he gives it, he gets the right answers. He does it to Rachel. Does he get to do it with the guys pretending to be Russian? I can't remember whether he actually administers the test.
The guy pretending to be Russian, I think, just like pulls a gun on him,
attacks
on the roof or something.
Right.
Yeah.
So I can't remember if he does it for anybody else. Maybe he does it in the office for Resh. And I guess maybe it could be left up to interpretation whether Resh beat the test and is an android.
Yeah.
So
because he doesn't specifically say, right?
Yeah.
But I think there are a lot of possible readings of the book. There are a lot of possible readings that a lot of the things that happen are just, weird things that Deckard is experiencing and haven't really happened. You make a good point in that the fake police station seems very like a very
elaborate,
kind of implausible thing for them to have just for a cover for a few androids with like real humans working there too. Right, because Phil Resch worked there.
It was like, it felt to me like all of a sudden for about 20 pages I was in like an Orwell novel. Like it was like there's too much weirdness and like second guessing going on, and then the rest of the book isn't really like that. So I'm kind of left to think, was that the real? But that's the one thing I'm learning from doing this show, is that like I think that's kind of the defining trait of classics, is that we're not going to take the same thing out of them. If you and I read something and we both just read it the same way, like if we watch Zoolander, we're not going to come up with multiple different interpretations of what happened in Zoolander. We're not going to have much to talk about. A commentary.
I think Zoolander was a replicant, and there are clues, and I'll
when he's doing that thing with his face.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think I've ever actually watched that movie. For all I know, it's a brilliant.
Something that when I reread Brothers Karamazov, there was an entire part that I totally blanked on in the first time I read it. I completely blanked on it. I mean, if you haven't read it, I don't want to say what.
No,
it is.
Yeah, I probably will.
Very central thing.
So that's actually a pretty good segue to one of the questions we always ask: is what was the biggest surprise for you in this book? I mean, I know you said you've read
like an actual thing that happened, or
anything
book,
about
just
it.
Something
well,
about
for instance, one of the first books we did was the Gulag Archipelago, and my biggest surprise was that it's a nonfiction piece. I honestly thought it was like One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. It was just an 800-page version of that. 2,400-page version of that. That I only read the first 2 volumes, by the way. I gave up after 2. I was like, I can't do this. Like, this is, I get it. The gulags are bad. I got it. I'm ready to do a show on it, So, but so it could be anything that surprised you, the L. Ron Hubbard thing is pretty surprising for me,
that's pretty surprising. I mean, I think it's tough because like I said, I think I read this book first, 2 decades ago or something like that.
Right.
But I think, when I first read it, I was surprised at how much it got to me, like emotionally. Like at the end, like it is heartbreaking when he finds that toad.
Oh, I hate that. Yeah.
It's just something about just like the brutality of that ending, and about how really you really identify with him a lot more than you identify with like a lot of sci-fi characters, in that he's kind of in this saga of just trying to get through this.
But it's not
thing,
just
right. And
it wasn't just heartbreaking because of his experience. It was also just for me. I was like, oh God, toads are actually extinct in this world.
Yeah.
I was like, that's a really bleak, you get this moment of hope, and then it turns it around. It's like, no, they're totally extinct.
And Philip K. Dick does that earlier with the owl.
With the owl, right?
Owl at the Rosen Corporation, and they're like, yeah, there actually are owls if you know where to buy. And he's like, really? And then he's leaving, and they're like, just kidding, there are no owls. Owls are extinct, right? And it's like,
and that's worse, because honestly, I'd rather have owls than toads if I had to choose. Gun to my head, if I was like, what animal would I rather have in the world? I'd go with owls. So. It'd be. I mean, I don't have anything against toads, but
that's a question I didn't think would come up. I might have to think about that one for a while. Like,
what would you rather have? Hey, you know what? Why don't we just do the next half hour of the podcast? I'll list animals, and you have to choose which one you'd rather have go extinct. It'll be your Voight Kemp test. We can tell whether you're an android by your responses. So yeah, that's the. By the way, anybody that supports us on Patreon, that'll be an outtake that you can get. It's just me, like horse or llama. Llama. Okay, great. All right, moa or pterodactyl. Just do that for the rest of the night. Bad news about pterodactyls, by the way.
You could have like a March Madness bracket. Like which one wins against the
right. Oh man, I really think Panda is going to make it all the way through. I mean, what are you going to put up against Panda that it's not going to win? Koala, koala would be like the top bracket. You don't put them in the same bracket. You seed them as number ones.
They're both one seed, so they're in different orders. Right? They're in different regions.
Yes,
right? And they're in different regions of the world too, so it makes sense.
Oh, maybe that's how you do it. Yeah, I mean, that's going to make it hard. I mean, the koala is really going to go straight to the top of the bracket in the Australia division because there's nothing else cute. Everything else just wants to kill you. So it's really,
What about the Platypus,
Platypus,
echidna.
I don't
I
know.
mean, Australia's got some good ones. Echidna,
Yeah, I mean,
wallabies, kangaroos,
wallabies. You know what's actually really cute is
wombats,
wombats are pretty
wombats.
charming.
Yeah,
I saw a wombat.
Tasmanian
Actually
devils.
walked up to a wombat that was like sleeping on the ground. I was like tempted to pet it, but then I was like, they actually have claws. I'm like, really probably not a great idea. So I didn't
Yeah.
do it. But so you don't have any surprises. Everything about this book is exactly where you left it the last time you read it.
I was kind of surprised at how deep a lot of the themes are. I think a lot of the themes are very, like we've discussed them. A lot of the themes you can
Sure.
actually really get into them. It's not just like, like a Terminator thing where it's like, hey, robots, became self-aware and then attacked humans or something like that. There are really big questions about, what it means to be a human, what it means
I don't
to be
know if
empathetic.
Terminator is not the best example of the most vapid thing in sci-fi. That's okay. There's some themes going
No,
on.
there are
That's
some things, but I would say it's not as subtle as this book.
No, it's not as subtle as this. Yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah,
Well, what
I
about
think
you? What surprised you about the book?
I mean, it's either just the world building that's going on in the book, which is not only more elaborate than the film, but just there's just more of it. It's not the same. I mean, it's like this post-nuclear.
Yeah.
I think it's a post-nuclear war world. Yeah, it is because they talk about the fallout.
It is. Yeah, they talk about.
Oh, that was one thing I wanted to talk about.
And the
people
kibble,
in the 50s.
Is it
Kibble? Yeah,
Kibble. Yeah, not kibble.
Kibble. Oh yeah, kibble.
I think
kibble.
it's kibble. Kibble is the dog.
Kibble and bits and bits and bits is a different thing than what's laying around from Mercer.
Yeah.
That's one thing I was thinking about is in the 50s and 60s, there are all these books where there's radioactive fallout. And it's like radioactive fallout, the reality of nuclear war is radioactive fallout is bad. It's a bad thing. It's not good. You don't want radioactive fallout. But it does not blanket the entire world and last forever and kill all life on Earth. It's just not like that, And there's so many books like that, like On the Beach and The Last Ship. There's all these books that are sort of based on that idea. And
but do you think Philip K. Dick meant that literally? Like that's what would happen?
Know.
Or is it more just like, from what I hear from like my mom, during the Cold War, this paranoia was just everywhere. It was ubiquitous, right? You did bomb drills in school.
Sure.
Everyone had bomb shelters, things like that. And so in a way, even though the physical fallout doesn't cover the earth, there is this idea that this fear of nuclear war pervades everything, right? It's absolutely everywhere.
It's not about our parents. I grew up with that. Up until I was we were like 13 or 14 when the Cold War ended. I had nightmares about it all the time and stuff. I mean, it was definitely something that scared me. The reality of nuclear war was bad enough, and it was something I was terrified of. And I think this idea of world blanketing, like civilization ending fallout was kind of a response to the people who weren't taking it seriously enough. There were always these people like these Curtis LeMay types that were like advocating just bombing the Russians. And it was, that's pretty scary when you think about it. So it's almost like it's like a negotiating position where you have to take like an extreme viewpoint to counter the extreme viewpoint. Just so that we get in the middle. So that's part of it. But and other than the world building stuff, my biggest surprise was that the term Blade Runner is so ad hoc, just have nothing to do with this source material and doesn't really work in the movie either. It's literally just a cool word that was appended to this film. Not long before the film was released. They hardly even explain why they're using the word or why the movie is called that. I think it's just synonymous with bounty hunter in the movie.
I don't know. Oh, in the movie, maybe. I think so. Yeah.
I mean, it's just out of nowhere. So I was surprised. I kept waiting for that to get explained somewhere in the book, like where that came from. I had to read the Wikipedia entry afterwards, and it was just like they just took some guy's script based on another book that mentioned that word, bought the rights to that script, and just took the word to put into the movie. I was like, why? What was the motivation there? Like, it's kind of cool sounding, I guess, but I mean, definitely, you cannot call a movie "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep." That is a terrible title for a movie.
Absolutely
like it's not a great.
It's
title
actually kind of I think it's an okay title for a book, right?
Because it's okay, but it's a little wordy even for a book title. Yeah. So the last thing to do on the show is we decide whether we're toasting this classic.
Okay, let me get a little more Chablis.
Oh, okay. You mean the Chablis? I literally, the people couldn't figure out what I was talking about until They were like, "Oh, I pronounce it Chablis." I was like, "Wow, really?" I mean, you work at it anyway. Have you ever seen the meme of Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec? And he's at Home Depot and he's like, "I know more than you do." Like that's how I'm starting to feel at the liquor store, which is kind of scary. I'm like, "Do you have Chablis and where can I find it?" And then immediately I'm like, "I can tell from your face the answer is no. You have no idea what I'm talking about." So I'm just gonna go wander around.
Well, I don't know if you remember this, but in Virginia, the alcoholic beverage control stores, the ABC stores,
sure.
So those are like highly prized government jobs because, they have like government pensions, government healthcare, things like that. And so a lot of times the people that work at the ABC stores actually don't drink, which leads to some awkward recommendations. So one time I was at an ABC store and I was getting scotch for a friend. To like celebrate something. And I don't really, maybe I know a touch more now, but at the time I knew nothing about scotch.
Right.
And I'm like, so which of these scotches would you recommend if someone likes, the kind of smoky scotch? And the guy's like, all of them on the top shelf are great. I'm like, you don't know anything, do you?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
He just basically pointed to the 30 most expensive ones. He's like, all these are great.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like you ask a question and you're just like, I can tell already that I've wasted my time asking this question. Goodbye. Can I just remove myself from this conversation? Like, this is not going to be helpful. So the way it works is
which Chablis is the oakiest for, you know what? I'm just going to stop myself right there.
Exactly.
I'll just go do it.
Exactly. And I ended up with Carlo Rossi, Chablis. And the guy was like, "Oh, I don't know why this is shelved over here. This is an Italian." And I was like, "It's not Italian. That's an American wine." And the guy was like, "No, it's not." And I'm like, "California table wine." Like, and it's a gigantic bottle. It's like a tome. Tome. That's a ton. Remember I was telling you about that word that means a lot of wine? A ton. TUN.
Oh, I didn't know. Like a barrel. It's like
it's like something like 50 barrels or some large measure of wine is called a ton. And every time I saw that word, I would pronounce it like that. How much wine are you drinking tonight? Oh, we drank a ton of wine. Anyway, so I got the Carlo Rossi. I just barely put a dent in it tonight, and I can't imagine I'm gonna drink it again because it's not something I love. What did you think about the Chablis?
I actually really liked mine. I left the bottle in the room,
but you got like a real bottle. You got something.
I got
French,
an actual French bottle from whatever. I think it's from the Bordeaux region. I'm not.
I think it's Burgundy usually.
Oh, Burgundy. Yeah.
So I got one. When it says Boujon, does that mean Burgundy? Does that mean it's from Burgundy? Yeah, I don't really know. That was my theory. So I did actually buy a different bottle of French wine that was labeled that way, but didn't say it was any other particular grape. So maybe it was right. I don't know. Anyway, I'm drinking the Carlo Rossi. So, so what we do at the ending here is, what we do at the end is that the rule is the person that chose the classic, the other person is the deciding vote about whether we toast the classic. So if you choose,
I've essentially already chosen by choosing.
Pretty much. Well, although sometimes like I've chosen things that I didn't end up liking as much as I thought I might. Like I don't always choose things that I've read before for my thing. It's not necessarily that, but
and actually I should mention sometimes you go back to something a couple of years later and it's really not as good as you remember. So it's definitely it's actually possible to choose something and be like, I recommend this, and then after you do it, you're like, I actually don't like it.
Yeah, I've made mistakes with that. I've recommended books to people before that they didn't age very well for me. Like I read them again after having recommended them. And I'm like, ooh, I was kind of a dumb person 10 years ago. This is not a very good book, Or one time I got halfway through a book and I recommended it to a friend because I was really enjoying it. And then I got to the second half of the book and I was like, oh man, like I'm like embarrassed that the person is reading this terrible ending to this book, like and associating with me. So I don't know. But so anyway, you can lobby if you want, but essentially I get to pick whether we're toasting this classic. So what's your feeling? I mean, are you toasting it?
I think it deserves to be toasted. I think, like I said, it raises some interesting questions. There are things that are definitely kind of unique to it, right? You're not going to be like, you're not going to be like, what was that book where they were grabbing the handles of the box and empathizing
Yeah, no,
with
that's
a
true.
person
Yeah.
walking
Yeah.
over a mountain? Was that Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants? No, wait, it wasn't.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, it was Yiddish
no.
Policeman's Union.
Oh, yeah, YPU.
Right.
And I think it has enough creativity to make it pretty memorable, and I think it's also a fun read. I mean, that's something we didn't really discuss, but it's a book you can really read.
We also kind of forgot to give a synopsis. That would have been smart. Sometimes I just dive right into these discussions and I forget to. So if anybody's listening to it, hoping to find out what the book was about, they're getting a really weird hodgepodge idea of what this book was about. So, Yeah. So, I'm down. I think I'm toasting it. I'm good with it. Okay. I thought it was, like I said, it was plenty to talk about. You're not going to get the same take on it. You're probably seeing, that's another thing about classics is like one time we did Catcher in the Rye. And it's like, I've read Catcher in the Rye like 3 different times in my life. And each time the book's a little different because I'm different. Absolutely. So it's like, not only do different people read it, but like you're probably experiencing this book differently than you did when you were 23 or whatever we were when we graduated college.
Yeah, 100%.
So I think that's a hallmark of a classic. I'm down. I'm toasting it. So bottoms up.
Okay.
Cheers.
All right.
Cheers. I'll clink something.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that was kind of wooden. Yeah, that was a little bit better.
I've got. There we go.
Oh, you're delayed. I saw you clink, and then it was like a second later where I heard it. I actually was looking. I was like, "Wow, how did that not make a noise?" And then all of a sudden, it hit me. Yeah, so we're toasting it, and that's usually how we wrap up the show. So, do you have anything else to add? Are we ready to call it?
I don't think so. I think we covered a lot of stuff.
Definitely,
but,
probably more references to 70s bad movies than we needed in talking about this. But
there was an extensive Battlefield Earth discussion.
I like the which animals should die bracket is actually pretty cool. I like
the March Madness bracket.
The March to Extinction Madness.
That can be a Patreon thing. You can get a downloadable bracket and fill it out.
There you go. There you go. Yeah.
Champion non-extinct animal. I would say actually, I really like. I'm surprised we didn't bring it up earlier, but I think that is a very good feature of a classic. Is that it in a way sometimes reflects almost more on you than on itself, right?
Sure.
You read it and you see it differently based on how you're approaching it. Whereas
there's probably a whole bunch
have a lot of depth.
Yeah, there's probably a whole bunch of like smart Derrida things I could say about that, about like the text and the signifier and whatnot. And I'm not going to get into it, but yeah, essentially, like you're bringing so much to it that it isn't really about the text itself. It's not Derrida. Who's the guy I'm thinking of? Think about the Grand Canyon. Whether or not you've ever seen the Grand Canyon before you actually see you don't actually see the real, anyway, whatever.
The signifier stuff is Derrida, isn't it?
Yeah, it's either Derrida or Saussure or somebody like that. Anyway, one of those guys that I didn't get into because I'm not as officially academic as you are. I'm sure you've come across, although you're
maybe
in
Smokey. Is it Smokey or the Bandit? Is it one of those?
No, it was the Bandit. It was the Bandit. Which I can't say without doing the Einstein voice. I'm sorry. Anyway, so I think we're good. We're toasting the classics. I think is done for the night. We're out. Peace out.
Thanks, Dave.
That's it for the 13th episode of Toasting the Classics. Damn to be a triskaidekaphobia. I think it went great. For those playing along at home, get some rum, lime juice, curacao, and orgeat syrup, and make some Mai Tais for next week's episode, where we'll be talking about Mark Twain's letters from Hawaii. Yeah, I had to look up the pronunciation of orgeat syrup. If you'd like to get in touch, send us an email at toastingtheclassics@gmail.com. Send us show ideas, your comments and complaints, votes on whether Jay is a replicant, whatever. Check out my blog at theattractivenuisance.com and follow us on Twitter at @ractivenuisance. Our music was written by Michelle McArthur. See you next time on Toasting the Classics.